I think that everybody knows the 2025 season is a massive one for Luke Fickell. I don't think there's anybody that is oblivious of that fact. And today we're going to talk about the Wisconsin Badgers. We're going to take a deep dive into this team to see what we should expect from this team in 2025. And when you go 5-7, especially after everything that's gone on, it's easy to see why expectations are high. It's easy to see why people expect more. Maybe expectations aren't high, but higher than what we've seen so far. And Luke Fickell would probably be the first person to tell you that he understands that. He knows that he's not winning at the clip that you brought him in for. And this is a team that has drastically missed the mark. And when you look at what this team should be doing, it's very disappointing, especially with the tradition that this team has, the tradition of winning, the style of play, and you knew that it was going to take some time. And I guess the one thing is that if you're going to give Luke Fickell something, it's that it does take a while to change some of these cultures. And Wisconsin has done things for a certain way, a certain period of time, and they've done it their way, and it's worked. But college football has changed, and Luke Fickell, honestly, when he was hired, I thought this was going to be a really good fit. Now, he didn't get a lot of the coaches that he wanted to come with him. That's been a big part of that. But I think that if you're going to make a change at Wisconsin, you're going to make a slight change. You still want to be running the football. You still want to continue those traditions where you have really good tight ends, you have really good defenses, but you're going to do that in a different way. And it just hasn't happened yet. Now, maybe it's from understanding the weight of the situation, but this team brought in a ton of talent from the transfer portal to replace some of the talent that they lost. Now, the Xavier Lucas situation is obviously still ongoing. That's a very interesting situation, but we're not going to dive into that because it doesn't matter for this video. You bring in a number of defensive tackles, and that was, I feel like I've said this in every deep dive video. Defensive tackle was such a premium position, and there are some teams, including Wisconsin, that brought multiple defensive tackles in because of maybe concerns up front. And you can tell which positions this team desperately needed by how many potential starters they brought in at one position. And Wisconsin brings in Parker Peterson from Tulane, Michael Gardner from Grambling, JVR Suggs, which is an interesting story, from LSU. You also bring in Charles Perkins from UT Martin. So you clearly needed help at that position, and you went out and really didn't waste any time getting to that. So I think that's something that tells you a lot about this team. You obviously needed a quarterback as well. Tyler Van Dyke goes to SMU, and I'm kind of bummed that situation didn't get to play out more. Obviously, the game against Alabama didn't allow that, but you do bring in Billy Edwards. I think Billy Edwards is a very underrated player. I do like the addition of Danny O'Neal, but what does that look like in the Jeff Grimes offense? I don't necessarily know. So that's going to kind of be a question mark for the time being. And like I said, you brought in a number of new faces to compete, but also you have plenty of returning talent that you should feel pretty excited about as well. Now, you obviously are going to have to look at Billy Edwards and what he's capable of doing in this offense. You also brought in Danny O'Neal, who had a really good year at San Diego State. And I think that he is going to be a nice depth piece should Edwards need a replacement, or you do need to sit him down for whatever reason. But Billy Edwards is going to be a big reason why you potentially have success. You look at what he did at Maryland, over 2,800 yards, 15 touchdowns. I'm excited to see what he can do at Wisconsin. And it's a passing attack that honestly is, once again, under the radar. Now, I will say that the talent, it's kind of a similar situation, but also I like the talent, and maybe it's why it's a similar situation. I like the talent on this team. I think they have some players that are ready to step up and take, I think, strides in their development. But that's kind of what we said with a lot of older Wisconsin teams. So it's kind of still to be determined at this point. So Billy Edwards is going to have to show some signs that he can provide some stability to this passing attack, an ability to move the ball efficiently, because ultimately this team still does want to run the football. They still want to be physical and they still want to get downhill. And in the Big Ten, winning in the trenches is going to be important. And they have the offensive line that should, in theory, be able to do that. That also helps Billy Edwards get his confidence as a passer. It's going to give him easier throws to make because the field is going to be open. But if they're not able to run the ball, it could be tough. Now, Danny O'Neil is a little bit different quarterback than Billy Edwards, and that is, I think, really exciting as well. So even if he doesn't play this year, you feel good about what he could potentially do next season as well. So the quarterback position feels set. Now, how much confidence you have in that group, I don't necessarily know, but I do like Billy Edwards. I think he's a solid QB. He's not going to do anything ground shattering, but I think he's going to be really fun to watch in this offense. As long as everything clicks, he should be solid. Now, the running back position is relatively wide open. Guys like Dylan Jones, Darian Dupree, Cade Yakimelli, those are going to be guys that pretty much take the majority of the carries. Now, are any of them going to get Wisconsin back to the days of the Monty Balls, the Ron Danes? I wouldn't bet on it by any means. However, I think this could be a much better group running the football purely because I think at times just looked real rough. And the fact that they finished 78th is kind of sad, honestly. It is just, again, hasn't gone how a lot of us thought under Luke Fickell. It just hasn't been the experience that a lot of people wanted. And if you're going to turn things around, you look at what Fickell did at Cincinnati. Being physical up front is one way that they were able to win a lot of football games. And if they're able to get back to that, you feel pretty good. I like what Jones and Dupree can do. I like what they're capable of producing for this offense. And they have an offensive line, like I said, that is experienced and should be able to open things up for them. So if you're looking for optimism, I think that you have the backfield to look towards, and then you also look up front. There is hope for this team. It's just going to be tough, especially when we dive into the schedule. But the passing attack is going to start with Billy Edwards. But I think when you look at the wide receiver talent, there are options. And we have said this about Wisconsin passing attacks in the past, and things have played out one way. They've also played out another. Sometimes it's worked, and sometimes it's been real rough. Getting Vinny Anthony back is a huge win for this program. Only 39 catches, but averaged 17.2 yards per catch. He is an explosive player that could be really fun to watch. Now, you also bring in Jaden Ballard and DeKal Crowdis from the transfer portal. Chris Brooks Jr. is someone who could be explosive. Trech Kakuhuno is a young player that is ready, I think, to be more of a threat for this team. I think he still has a lot of untapped potential in his game. 25 catches, 339 yards, 2 touchdowns. Ballard comes in from Ohio State, which was a crowded room. And when you're going to Ohio State, you know that it's going to take some time to get on the field. Ballard decides, hey, I need to get to a place where I can play, and he could definitely start for this team. I wouldn't be surprised. Joseph Griffin Jr. is another guy to keep an eye on there. The pass catchers need to find some explosiveness. They need to find reliability for Edwards. They can prove that they can get open, and that will help this offense find balance. If this offense finds balance, you feel a lot better about what they can do. Now, the tight end position, it doesn't give you the confidence that you've had in the past, but I think Tucker Ashcraft is ready for a big year. I think that he is ready to play a big role, has a good frame, has what we've seen from Wisconsin tight ends in the past. It just comes down to production, and maybe you're going to see that more in a Jeff Grimes offense, that the tight ends are featured more. So you also bring in Lance Mason from Missouri State. He had a solid year, pretty explosive at 17.4 yards per catch. Jackson Acker could be part of that as well. it's kind of wide open right now. And we'll see what this offense truly does look like if there is balance with both the rushing attack and the passing attack. And the skill positions are definitely a group to keep an eye on because there are so many new faces coming into the picture. The offensive line does feature plenty of returning talent, but you do have some new faces coming in as well. Davis Heinzen comes from Central Michigan, ton of experience, 36 career starts, started all 12 games for that team last year. Playing in the Big Ten will be a challenge. However, you do have Joe Brunner next to him. You also have Jake Renfro. Jake Renfro is honestly a great piece to have, especially with the new quarterback, having a veteran center, having a guy who knows the calls, knows how to get his guys into position, and gives your quarterback another pair of eyes to see things on the field, especially a guy who's coming in to a new program. Now they both have to learn this offense, but Jake Renfro is a nice piece to have coming back. JP Benchall is a new face to this offensive line in terms of a starter, but he has 27 games of experience. And I wish we were in the days where Wisconsin just, you plugged and played anybody that you recruited. This was a team that just churned out NFL talent or elite Big Ten talent on the offensive line. So while I'd like to say that Benchall is going to be that guy, it's also, there is some of an element of wait and see. Riley Mahlman, I think, is really fun, has really good size. If he can put it all together, he'll be an intriguing NFL prospect. So there's definitely potential. And I think the one thing that we keep talking about with Wisconsin is that there's a lot of concern, right? And it's easy to see that, right? It's not hard to figure out that you have concerns about any single position, the coaching staff, whatever. But I'm not hearing a ton of, well, what if this works? What if this group is able to do these things? And I know that it's track record and you can look to past history to see that, but I think you can also talk about the hope for this group and what happens if it does work. What happens if Billy Edwards is solid? What happens if this offensive line gets back to the tradition of being really physical and dominating defenses? I'm not saying it's going to happen, but what if? That's just a really fun thing to talk about in the offseason. And I think right now, Wisconsin fans have probably heard enough negativity that it's probably time to just give them a little bit of hope. We don't want to build their hopes up and just tell them things that aren't true, but there are some things that I do like about that offense. Same thing with the defense. I think this defense is super underrated. I don't think that they are getting a ton of attention, and part of that is maybe there's a lot of people who maybe don't like Mike Tressel and what he's doing, but I do think that this defense has a ton of underrated talent that does not get the appreciation it deserves. Starting up front, this is a group that will be asked to be more physical, to be more disruptive. And that starts with, you have two returning guys in Daryl Peterson and Ben Barton, combined for 50 tackles last year, but only 1 tackle for loss and 1 sack. Now, you're not going to get a ton of disruptive plays from the defensive tackle position. You're just not going to get that naturally because of the position, but Peterson could be more explosive. Barton is joined by Javier Suggs from LSU. You need more disruptive plays up front, and you brought guys that kind of did that. Now, Suggs only had 3 tackles for loss, but a guy like Parker Peterson, 5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. Charles Perkins at UT Martin, 9 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks. The problem is that you're getting some of these guys that are coming from lower group of 5 competition, and you're hoping that they were evaluated correctly and they can be disruptive. That's probably the biggest concern. Also, you have Corey Walker behind Peterson from Western Michigan, 38 tackles, 7 tackles for loss, 5.5 sacks. But these are guys that at least have been explosive and been disruptive. It'd be one thing if you brought in guys that didn't have that production and you're just hoping. You've at least seen them do it before. So you know that they're capable of doing it. And if you're going to improve as a defense, you're going to be disruptive up front, and that's going to help the guys behind them, the secondary specifically, but also the linebackers. And this is a group of linebackers that I think are really good. I think that they were trying to figure things out, and they may have sorted some things out in 2024 as the season progressed. Sebastian Cheeks is a guy who had 12 tackles last year, 2 tackles for loss, 2 sacks. He's stepping into a bigger role. Tackett Curtis, 27 tackles, 2 tackles for loss. Christian Allegro, 66 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. That's a trio that I think could be solid for this team this year. And if everything goes right up front, that makes their life a lot easier as well. So there are things that could go right. There are things that set up really well for this team. And again, I think a lot of people are just kind of discussing the negativity and the side of things where, what if this doesn't go right? Okay, well, what if it does? What if this defensive line is disruptive? What if these guys this staff hit on the transfers they bring in? Now, you're probably not going to have a huge hit rate, but what if they do? Behind those linebackers, you have a guy in Tyrese Fearbry from Kentucky who could be a factor. Same thing with Mason Rieger from Louisville. I keep getting that wrong, but Mason Rieger is a guy that I think could be more of a factor than people realize. You also have Antaron Turner from Western Carolina, but again, it's that lower level of competition that maybe you have a concern for. So up front, there are definitely pieces that you feel confident in. Up front, there are pieces that you are excited to see. And if they put all that together, that's going to make this defense better as a whole. Now, even though you lose Hunter Wohler on the back end, this secondary should still be solid. I am really excited to see what this secondary can do. Ricardo Hallman might be the best corner that nobody's talking about right now. He doesn't have maybe your traditional size, but he is someone that can make plays. He is someone that can shut down half of the field when he's playing at his peak. He has played a number of big-time players, and you've seen some good things from him. So he is someone that you feel really good about if you're a Wisconsin fan. And if you're looking at the brightest spot on this team, it might be him. I think that he could be really fun, and he has returning talent around him to make life a lot easier. Austin Brown and Preston Zachman are both coming back. 51 tackles for Brown, 2 tackles for loss, 1 forced fumble, 3 passes defended. Zachman, 58 tackles, 3 tackles for loss, 2 interceptions. The depth behind this group is going to be relatively new. Diane Hill comes in from Miami, 33 tackles for him. You also have Matthew Traynor coming from Richmond, Matt Jung from Bethel, a D3 program. This is a dude that did literally everything for that defense. 109 tackles, 10.5 tackles for loss, 2.5 sacks, 9 interceptions. I'm curious to see how that translates to the FBS level. So if anything, that's a guy to keep an eye on. But overall, you feel really good about what this group could do. And this is a group that was very successful last year. It was the 14th best defense in the country against the pass. Now, you want to be able to defend the run better, but defending the pass was something that I think they did really well at times. Part of that has to do with a guy like Ricardo Hallman, but the overall group feels like it's in a really good place. Now, the nice thing for this team is that you get a couple games to kind of get everybody up to speed, right? The problem is that game 3 is at Alabama, and it did not go well when Alabama came to Wisconsin. I don't envision that it's going to go better in Tuscaloosa. So if you're this team, it's almost like you kind of have to anticipate that it's not going to go your way, right? Not that you ever want kids to expect to lose. However, the signs are all there. Now, it would be a massive upset, but that's going to be a tough one. However, if you can shake that off, maybe you're able to bounce back, because you can't lose the Maryland game right after that. You just can't. The schedule does not give you any breaks. The schedule does not give you opportunities to relax or feel sorry for yourself. And the first loss of the season can't just derail you even more than this season has the potential to do. After the Maryland game, you get a bye week. Then you get a terrible stretch at Michigan, Iowa at home, Ohio State at home, at Oregon. You then get another bye week to start November before you host Washington, go to Indiana, host Illinois, rivalry game against Minnesota. If you are looking for winnable games, they might be the three of the first four games. There's a real chance that this is a 3-9 football team. And I don't like to be that negative, but that's just a reality of playing in the Big Ten. Because in the past, maybe instead of now you have Oregon and Washington, maybe you get a Purdue on this. Maybe you get a Rutgers, which is a very different matchup than those other two teams. Indiana being better obviously doesn't help, but you have a much tougher road to a bowl game now. Now, what is the ceiling for this team is probably a huge question as well. Is 6-6 possible? Maybe. Miami, Ohio, Middle Tennessee, Maryland. I think the Iowa game is a game they could win if things are going well. Indiana's not going to be as good as they were last year. Illinois is a solid team, but Indiana and Illinois are two games that you feel that Wisconsin won't be favored in. And then Minnesota is always a tough one. But finding 6 wins isn't, I don't think, as difficult as maybe people will make it out to be. But at the same time, it is going to be a challenge. And then the question is, if you go 6-6 after going 5-7 last year, is that going to be acceptable? Is that going to keep Luke Fickell around? Because there is a real chance that they start the year 3-1 and they do not win another game until 2026. So what happens if they're 3-9? Do you give him some grace because it's a tough schedule? I doubt it. But at the same time, it was always going to take some time. I think that there is more room for optimism than people believe, but also being realistic, it's going to be tough. And it's not an ideal situation to be in if you're Luke Fickell. He has plenty of work to do, but nobody also expected him to bring Cincinnati to the college football playoff. Wisconsin is not in that territory, but maybe Fickell has some tricks up his sleeve. Maybe he made the right additions, whether that's the coaching staff, whether that's the transfers. Maybe he found ways to give his team an advantage, and a lot of people are just not looking at that. We will see how this season plays out. We will see ultimately where this team lands. And right now, it's just kind of a to be determined to see what happens in 2025.